This is C-SPAN's Road to the White House. A new film, Inside the Bubble, gives a behind-the-scenes look at the Kerry campaign and the final months of the 2004 presidential race. Coming up, we talk to Steve Rosenbaum, the film's director. A note about this program: the film includes language that some may find offensive.
Are we ready for a great night here in America?
Some man.
Yeah, Bob, that's very good. I heard her crying in the White House. I know.
And the fate of the nation comes down to little pieces of paper like this. Scribbled numbers that you get from somebody who's not supposed to share their exit poll with you. These numbers have held for about four hours now. And they are, Kerry's the top number. Ohio, 5148. Pennsylvania, 5643. Florida, 5148. They have a word for that. And they usually write it in big black print on the front of newspapers. And they call it a fucking landslide.
Steve Rosenbaum, director of the movie Inside the Bubble. How did the film come about?
You know, as a filmmaker, you live for opportunities to be inside a fabulous story. And you know, the run for the White House probably as big a story as you're ever going to get. We were making a television series called Staffers, and so we were with all the Democratic campaigns. And then when the nomination went to Kerry, it became clear to us that there was a story there. And we couldn't get any television network to buy the idea of staying with just Kerry because Bush had said no, and they would have wanted it to be balanced. So instead we said, we're just going to stay and make it as a feature film.
When did you begin filming this, and how much access did you have to the Kerry campaign? Did it change also once you got the nomination?
Okay, so the actual film begins at the convention and goes up and through the day of the election. And the answer is, you know, this is a good debate. The film's called Inside the Bubble, and those of us who know politics know the bubble travels with the candidate. It's the circle around him of his most closest advisors and advanced people. So we weren't in Washington. We were with the 5 leading people in the bubble. I want to be clear. We had only marginal access to Shrum and Sasso. They waved at us from, you know, a distance and then ran from the cameras.
Who did you have access to?
Stephanie Cutter, who is the communications director, David Wade, who's the press secretary, Marvin Nicholson, who's a fabulous character, who's the body man, the personal aide, and I don't know if you know this story, but he was John Kerry's caddy, and they met at a windsurfing shop, and now he's the guy that is, you always see him in every picture, big, tall, blonde guy. David Morehouse, senior advisor, had been with Kerry for 1.5 years, 2 years, and then Jim Loftus, who you just saw in that clip, whose title is press wrangler. He's been a lifelong Democratic operative, very senior guy, and in some ways is a controversial guy in our movie, I have to say.
We're going to show one scene in the movie in which Delaware Senator Joe Biden is speaking to reporters. How typical was it that people other than the candidate would meet with the press?
Not typical. I mean, the Biden scene is an unusual one, both because of its frankness and because it was one of the rare moments when the campaign kind of let anything out of the bag. You know, one of the things that people have been critical of the campaign for was the fact that everything was not only stage managed, but that the message was so carefully parsed that when you see the Biden clip, you're stunned that someone isn't running up to him and saying, stop, 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 you're not allowed to say this.
Here's the exchange with Delaware Senator Joe Biden on the campaign trail last year.
What you do when you haven't run before is you think the guys who are managing are smarter than you in terms of not the substance, but in terms of, well, this is the way, you know, the press will respond. Who gives a goddamn how you respond? I really mean it. I don't give a goddamn how you respond.
Forgive me for asking this, because I know you're trying to stay on message things.
No,
like, I know you don't care what the reaction of the ink-stained wretches is generally, but watching this campaign, as we all have for so long, it seems like every 10 minutes there's a shift in sort of what the strategy is. Again,
who gives a shit? Whether you think or anybody thinks they're going to stick to a message. What is important is what's coming out of his mouth. The story is what's coming out of his mouth. Not whether Joe Lockhart got trumped by me or anybody else to change the message. That ain't the story. That's your story. But that ain't the story anybody around here cares about. Anyway, see you guys. I got to go.
Stunning, right? I mean, so unlike the campaign or what it felt like to be out there or anything Kerry ever said.
We also are going to show David Morehouse in just a moment, where he was off the campaign trail. The campaign gave him and other staffers a few days off.
Right.
You went with the cameras to his home?
Well, again, what we were trying to do in the film was get an understanding of not who John Kerry the man was, but what this feeling was of being inside the Kerry campaign. And so any place where we could get a personal moment, a little bit of downtime, a sense of who these people were as human beings. And I have to say, there's been some criticism of the film in terms of, did these guys know what they signed up for? Every one of the people that was in this film was incredibly generous with their time. And I think privately, although I don't know that they would say it to you if you called them, the people within the campaign feel like it was a pretty honest portrayal.
Did they ever ask you to kind of back off?
Sure, all the time. I mean, when you're a reporter in a news story that's 24 hours, 7 days a week, you're always saying, can I be here? Can I be here? And, the one thing I want to be really clear about is there's not a frame in this film, whether it's the Biden piece we just saw or the Morehouse piece you're about to see, in which we kind of hid the camera under our shoulder and said, oh, it's off. I mean, we said we're going to photograph the campaign in the way that it is willing to be photographed, and we're going to be persistent. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we were there an awful lot, and we shot 500 hours worth of tape. So we were there, a lot, but there was never a moment where we did kind of leave the camera on in the conference room and sneak out.
Here's Senior Advisor David Morehouse when he had some downtime from the campaign last fall.
Gonna get him and give the raspberries. Who's gonna do that? Daddy's gonna do it.
Daddy!
Yes.
Daddy!
Daddy's here.
Daddy!
Why do you keep running around yelling, Daddy? Here I am.
Dada! Dada!
I know, that's no good, huh? He's become afraid of my suitcase.
Daddy!
Yep, that's Daddy up on the wall.
Who's that?
Daddy!
It's Daddy. Who's that?
Daddy!
There was a time when he was calling all pictures Daddy. That's when I knew it was time to come home.
What does this tell you about the personal sacrifices, whether you're working for a Democrat or Republican candidate in the fall of a presidential election year?
Well, I have to say, of the group that we covered, only David Morehouse had a family, and it's a young family. And Jackson, who's a wonderful little boy and a remarkable character in the movie, frankly, is looking at these pictures of his father with Hillary Clinton, his father with Al Gore, his father with Bill Clinton, and it's pretty clear that, David Morehouse has made an enormous sacrifice. And later in the film, you see that throughout the film, he's on the phone, basically, talking to Jackson about what he's reading and, what does the cow say? Moo. I mean, he handles it graciously, but this is not a job in which people have families.
Why did they let you do this?
That would be a good question to ask them. I think, first of all, what we learned from the war room is that, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody videotapes it or records it, you don't know that there were staffers involved. And so I think within the staff, there was a sense that they were doing extraordinary work, that this guy was going to become president, and they wanted to be part of that story. In the same way that people do grip and grins with politicians, why do you do that moment where you smile and get your picture taken? It's like, I was there. So I think that that was some of the motivation. But I also think they felt like they were doing the best job they possibly could, and I don't think there's anything in the film fundamentally and individually in the scenes that they feel bad about. The ending of the movie, they feel bad about, and that wasn't the ending that I would have written. I would have had a more successful film if he'd won.
And how was it financed?
Desperately, with pennies and credit cards. And we had we have 4 executive producers on the film. Basically, we financed it privately. And along the way, they would call me and say, by the way, what are we doing with this movie if he loses? And I said, that you can't operate with that assumption. So the presumption was that we, took the gamble that we were going to have the film of, how John Kerry got to be president.
Did you think he was going to win?
Yeah, I did. I did, in fact, think he was going to win. And, when you're in the bubble is the bubble. You don't get outside much. And so you get the adrenaline, you get the energy, and you get the rock concerts, and you get the Bruce Springsteen, and you get the road, and you get this whole energy, which both Doug and Kate, with Doug Davis, who was the filmmaker who began at the very beginning of the process with, and then Kate Cunningham, who came on in August, both of whom, I would check with them every day, and they would say they think they're going to win.
In late August, the Swift Boat Veterans for Truth began airing some ads in some select markets. They then put the ads on the website. And it continued into the fall debates, including this one scene in St. Louis. Can you set up what the audience is about to see?
Well, the thing about Swift Boat is within the people we spoke to, we did a series of interviews after the election. And some of them are on tape and they're in the film, some of them are on the phone. And in each case, everybody in the campaign will tell you it wasn't the Swift boat ads that were effective. It was the fact that they didn't respond and didn't respond quickly. So I think that the scene speaks for itself.
Again, from the movie Inside the Bubble, and we'll begin from St. Louis.
We're trying to figure out how they're going to try to get even because they were really pissed about what we did the last two debates. So the only way we can think that they would try to get even is to have someone off stage that when the debate's over, that instead of just bringing out the spouses, they would bring someone out on camera. Maybe they'd bring Bush Sr., Colin Powell.
They pushed for Colin Powell last week.
Okay. All right, I'm going to get on this operations call.
Stephen Morehouse, there's been asked in for Tony Wilson, the state's political director, to ride in the motorcade from the debate to the rally.
Unfortunately, he's going to want to unwind with THK.
Why is he going to be with THK?
Because he just finished a major debate, and he's going to need a couple minutes before he goes to a rally to unwind. It's not a big deal. This way.
If we couldn't trust John Kerry then, how could we possibly trust him now?
It's sick. This guy went over there and fought for his country, and war hero saved a man's life, and they put that crap on television. It's ridiculous.
How could you accuse us of being war criminals? How can you expect our sons and daughters to follow you when you condemned their fathers and grandfathers?
It was an internet ad, then $200,000 ad buy, the first Swift post, whenever it was, mid-August. Fox immediately ran with it as though it were a news story, which is predictable and understandable. That's what they do. CNN, good government grounds, sat on their hands for 3 days. But the difference this time was Fox is kicking CNN's ass in ratings. So CNN finally said, give me Swift boat. The fact that those two are in competition and they drive it into the cycle is instructive, But we fucking missed it. Everybody missed it. I think people in our headquarters are applying the old lesson, which is you're the dumbest person in the room if you're advocating keeping this thing up in the air.
So the first day, that's your reaction. That's the right reaction. The second day it plays, now the question is, do you respond now and turn it into a 3-day story, or do you let it go?
Why do so many of us have serious questions? John Kerry cannot be trusted.
So Fox had it for 3 days by themselves. That started to percolate. CNN kicked it up, the networks kicked it up, and they kept taking gaps. To me, that's the most interesting dynamic that's happened in this campaign, and it killed us. But I'd rather have a nightmare August than a nightmare October. Fuckers.
It wasn't necessarily a substance of not responding. It was not responding to being attacked. It was a deeper effect of someone smacking John Kerry. He's not hitting back. He must be weak.
Steve Rosenbaum, was that exchange typical of the strategy sessions in the campaign?
No. I mean, I have to say, if there were strategy sessions in the bubble, we didn't see them. I think they were. I'm only guessing they were happening in Washington, or they were happening behind closed doors with Sasso and Shrum. All of the people that we were with were basically focused on managing the media and basically setting up the pageantry of the campaign.
How did you go about filming this? It was you. Who else was with you, and how did you make sure you had the access that you needed?
Well, to be clear, I shot a total of about 3 days on this film. I'm not a field photographer. Doug Davis did the bulk of the shooting up through August, and then Kate Cunningham came on and did about another third. In terms of the access was endlessly negotiated. So it would depend on the day, it would depend on money, it would depend on travel, it would depend on, the cost of covering a campaign is enormous. So near the end, when they were doing 5 legs we had 2 cameras on board. You're talking about, we would have $50,000 weeks of airplane bills. So it was a constant juggle.
We're going to see this next scene, which has been getting some attention during the debate, and there's a cutaway shot of Senator Clinton from New York. Was that done the same time he made the remark?
We had 2 cameras. I have to say, if you read on the web, there are 2 entirely different takes on this scene, and I'll leave it up to your viewers to decide what she's responding to. I have a particular take, which I'll tell you afterwards.
Let's show the clip from the St. Louis debate, 2004.
The president got $84 from a timber company that he owns, and he's counted as a small business.
I own a timber company? That's news to me. You need some wood? Most small businesses shut down their escorts.
What just happened? He said, did I own a timber company? Do you need some wood? That's weird. Timber company? What the fuck was he talking about?
That we've been using against drug dealers and white-collar criminals.
Bush owned a timber
I
company?
don't think so. I hope you don't think that. I mean,
Did you hear that?
Because I think whoever's president must guard your liberties, must not erode your rights.
Okay, you guys are on that because they're going to be all over it.
That concludes tonight's debate.
That's good. ABC has us. We won 44-41. It's closer than the last one, but we won.
Mr. Morehouse.
Marvin, I want you to go out there, stand behind the senator, and stick your tongue out. I'll give you $50.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'm sure it'd be very useful, helpful to the campaign.
It wouldn't hurt the campaign.
Now maybe I could go out and like, pull my pants down.
Now that would be something.
Maybe.
I'd give you more than 50 for that. Great job, man.
Well done.